church to kind of see
Hey
what was going
guys.
on.
Hi, I'm sorry to interrupt you guys, but you're not live yet.
It went live and then it
Okay.
went unlive, and I just went live again. So I think we're good.
Okay,
I don't
you
know.
just went live again. Great. So I'm just confirming because I have not been able to see you as a participant yet at all. So it seems like it's just running a little slowly. I'm going to leave the stage again and see if you're live. And if you're not, I'll come back.
Okay.
All right.
So if people are watching, we have technical issues we're sorting out right now. So we may start over on some of this.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now on my phone. Let me try one more time. Huh. Yeah, so we're not live.
Up in the corner, it says running time, and it's marking time there. Don't know what that means. It says that we're live.
Yeah. What do you think, Tony? I don't see it on my phone as live.
Right.
It says we're live here.
Yeah, when I left the stage and went to watch as a participant, I saw it on my computer. But for some reason on my phone, I'm gonna try to just put it in manually again just to see.
Oh wait, I see something. Hold on.
Okay.
I think this button is the one that Hillary was saying don't turn off, but it looks like it is off. So let me try
good. That. The start stream mode. Did you do that?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, I was just about to check that one. Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure you guys were up and running because I was tuning in over breakfast and wasn't seeing you. So
thank you for catching that.
I was like, where are they? Where are they?
Teamwork.
All right, I'll leave you guys to it. Great. Bye. Start over.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Zach, you want to check in then? Start off again?
Yeah. So, I think normally we're just doing everything live, but for the sake of the point of this is to get to know you, John. So I think we'll redo our check-in here. But yeah, I was just saying I'm checking in. What was I checking in? What am I checking in now? Nervous. Yeah, I was feeling nervous. But yeah, really happy, excited, and honored to be doing the Gentle Curiosity with you today. I also I was kind of reminded when you were talking that the being actively planning the 67 experiment and then so we're watching the progress. So we've never done this before, so I'm kind of watching it and going, come on. So there's some nervousness around that as well, just to see kind of like expectant, excited nervousness to see what comes of this experiment. So I'm in.
Thank you, Zach. So what just happened, and again, I'm unclear as to who saw what. Some of you may just have tuned in, but we actually started a couple of minutes ago, and then Tony Daniels got on and said, "Oh, you're not live. We can't see you." And I thought of something that I heard George Barna say a number of years ago. He's sort of the church researcher, written lots of books. And he said this, it's really stuck with me. He said, you can be excellent or you can be authentic, but you can't do both. And I think that is so profound. So what you are seeing right here is very authentic. Is it perfect? Do we get everything, like some great worship service and everything fits and flows? No, it's sometimes going to be messy, but I think that is what characterizes Luke 10. And then I was sharing about my own journaling with the Lord this morning and reflecting on what's going on this week, where we're inviting everybody, God and everybody, the public, to come and see interviews and our meetings and all the rest. And the word that came to me was the word unprecedented. That in my previous life as a pastor for 25 years, we would never have done something like this. The session meetings for Presbyterians, that's when the elders meet, were sometimes not all that pretty, and there were a lot of politics, and there was conflict, and it wasn't always handled very well. And so we wouldn't really have wanted the public to come watch and see. So how does that make me feel? I feel proud of Luke 10. We focus on on working on relational brain skills. And the result of that is I think that we have a really healthy community. Not perfect. We certainly have conflicts and issues and all the rest, but I think we have ways of repair and working through things. And I just feel very proud and happy that we can kind of say to the world, hey, come and see it, come and watch what we do. And you're going to see it as it is, where the sausage is made, as somebody said. So that would be my check-in today. I feel proud and excited and happy about what we're doing. I'm in.
Thanks. See how the sausage is made.
Here we are.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into gentle curiosity. And for those that are watching, we use that phrase, gentle curiosity, to I think to distinguish between. Actually, I think John, you said this in one of your podcasts. You said that it's not obnoxious curiosity, where you're kind of like probing and just like trying to rip off the layers of the person, sort of aggressively or without any tact. And it's also not. I don't remember the other. What was the other one you used? Was it like nosy?
Yeah, that's sort of the negative side of, curiosity killed the cat. My mother used to say a long time ago. So there's a type of curiosity that is, obnoxious and nosy and really self-centered. You're kind of looking for juicy gossip.
Yeah.
This is different than that.
Yeah. So we want to slowly and respectfully discover a person at their pace and respecting their boundaries and respecting them. So that's kind of what gentle curiosity is. So here we go. Okay, sir. Share your name, where you live, and a little bit about your family and the kind of work you do.
Sure. John White, and we live in Naples, Florida. Tamala, my wife, and I moved down here a little over 2 years ago after 40 years in Denver. So we're happy to have palm trees in our front yard. That's pretty fun. So married to Tamala, we just celebrated our 33rd wedding anniversary. Have 2 children, 2 girls, and 3 grandkids. Grandkids are all teenagers at this stage. And the work that I do is, I guess you say I'm full-time with Luke 10. And one of the titles I have is a vision champion. So that's probably good. I'm passionate about the vision of Luke 10 and love sharing that with people, outside Luke 10, but also inside Luke 10, sort of keeping us focused on what I think the Lord has called us to.
Good. So I would like to ask you about if you could share briefly about your spiritual journey, your faith journey. You can focus in on whichever chapter you feel is most important. But yeah, just a few minutes to hear a bit of your story there.
Sure. Well, I'll give you the overview, and feel free to, if there are parts of that sound interesting and you'd like to know more, I'm happy to unpack that. I grew up in West Virginia. We were, I would call us nominal churchgoers, again, Presbyterian. A pivotal event for me was when I was 15 and my family moved to Bethesda, Maryland. Very difficult time for me. I was kind of a quiet, shy introvert. And so all of a sudden I'm starting in a new high school, not knowing a single soul, and probably was clinically depressed for part of my 10th grade year. Being good Presbyterians, we began going to a church close to our home, which turned out to be a great church, Fourth Presbyterian Church in Bethesda. And there I heard somebody talk about the idea of having a personal relationship with Jesus for the first time. I'd never heard that before. And I eventually felt like that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to have a kind of personal relationship, and made that profession of faith when I was 15. Turned out to be a great youth group. We had like 200 kids in our high school youth group, and there was a lot of I was discipled in some really good ways. Looking back, I think it was mostly left brain kinds of things, Bible studies and things like that. But a lot of positive experiences there. Went on to college at Washington and Lee University in Virginia and continued seeking to walk with the Lord. Lots of stories there. Sometime in the midst of college, felt like I was called, the Lord was calling me into the ministry full time. And in those days, the only way you did that was to go to seminary. So I went to Fuller Seminary, late 60s, early 70s. Again, I have lots of feelings about my seminary experience now. Again, very left brain experience. And then from there was called to a church in Denver, Colorado in 1973 as the youth pastor. So early on, I spent lots of time with high school kids. Was at that church for 13 years. So youth pastor, then singles pastor, then small groups pastor. So I've worn a lot of hats. 1984, another very difficult time. My wife at the time that I'd been married to for 14 years decided she didn't want to be married anymore. I don't love you. I don't want to be married to you. And so over a process of a couple of years, trying all kinds of different things, counseling, all the rest, that ended in a divorce. We had 2 children in the midst of that. Very dark period for me, a lot of depression again. But I think my life is kind of characterized by a number of times when I was sort of ekbaloed from different things. And going through that divorce meant resigning from the church that I'd been a part of for 13 years, thinking I'd maybe never be in ministry again. It was a very dark time. But the Lord opened some doors. I got back into ministry as a pastor, was on staff with a mega church in Denver, and then ended up planting a church. So again, all these different hats of senior pastor, church planting pastor, youth pastor, lots of experience on the inside of traditional church. Did that, planted a church, did that for a number of years. And in 1998, I was again ekbaloed. I was cast out, thrust out from the world of traditional church. Left to myself, I'd probably still be there, but God had other plans, and I ended up doing house church by default, having no idea what we're doing. But little by little, the Lord began to teach us this kind of a new way of being and doing church. I then spent 6 years as the U.S. coordinator for Dawn Ministries. That came to an end in 2007. But I'd met a guy there named Kent Smith, who was part of North American Dawn team. And Kent and I felt like the vision of Dawn, which was to see a church in easy access of every person in the planet. We'd been kind of really influenced by that. We wanted to continue. And the Lord gave us the name Luke 10 as the name of a new ministry. And so we started that. It was about 15 years ago now. And then there's a whole process of how Luke 10 developed. That's kind of the big overview. I'll let you dive into anything that sounds interesting.
Yeah, first, just for the people watching, could you take 30 seconds to explain ekbalo? I mean, you did very quickly, but just unpack it a little.
Yep, ekbalo. It's a word that's used in Luke chapter 10, verse 2, part B, we say, 10:2b prayer, where Jesus says, beseech the Lord of the harvest to thrust out workers. And that word to thrust out is ekbalo. In the Greek, balo is to throw or cast, ek is out, and it's actually the word used for casting out demons. So it's a pretty violent word. So we're asking the Lord to thrust people out to be workers in his harvest. And that's something that happened to me on a number of occasions. I usually went kicking and screaming, I must add. I was never very happy about that, but that's what the Lord used.
Ekbalo. Yeah, we use that a lot in our community. Okay, so the next couple questions are kind of about your discovery of Luke 10. We asked the question to other people that are that weren't part of Luke 10, but you started it. So we'll see how you may have to adapt the question.
Okay.
There are, real quick, Zach, and if you're going on to something else, just letting you know there's some questions down below.
Great. Awesome. Yeah, we're gonna. I'll probably glance at the questions, but we'll probably answer them at the end. So yeah. All right. So when did you first learn about Luke 10? That wouldn't work for you. Okay. I guess the question would be, can you tell a little more of the story of those starting days with Kent? You said that you really resonated with the vision of the Dawn ministry, which was to see a church and easy access of everyone on the planet.
Yep.
So I guess in what ways did that continue, and in what ways did it shift for you and Kent, and anything else you want to share about that?
Okay, sure. So the ministry called Dawn Ministry, first of all, the title DAWN stood for Discipling a Whole Nation. So go back to the Great Commission, make disciples of all the nations. How exactly would you disciple a nation or a people group? That's what Dawn was working on, and I was kind of captured by that vision. So Dawn comes to an end, and it's just Kent and myself, and what's next? About all the Lord had given us at that point was the title, Luke chapter 10, believing that that's the clearest place where we see Jesus's strategy for making disciples. Throughout my history as a Christian, lots of different Christian leaders had come up with a strategy for discipling a nation. And it dawned on me one day, what if we asked the question, what was Jesus's strategy? And I think it's very clearly laid out in Matthew 10 and then Luke 10. And basically this idea of sending people out 2 by 2 to find houses of peace. And I think what he was doing was he was starting churches in those houses of peace. So that was sort of a big light bulb that went on for me, that's where we see how Jesus did it. When we started Luke 10, the other thing we had besides a name were some questions. And the main questions were, so Jesus, how could we do church in such a way that at least 2 or 3 things are true? One is that there's genuine, sustainable transformation. That is, that people's lives are changed. We're not just going through the motion. We're not just going to church as a meeting, but so that people's lives were changed. Sustainable transformation. And the second question, how could we see viral multiplication? I've been a part of a church long enough to know that we had lots of sort of strategies or programs for multiplication, church planting, and those things. But what if it could be viral? What if it could be, we've had a great example, of course, with COVID in recent years of what a virus actually looks like. And COVID is what we call a malevolent virus, something that is destructive or harmful. But what if we understood the gospel as a benevolent virus that is spread in sort of an organic kind of a way? What would that look like? How could we do that? And that's all we knew. We didn't, Luke 10 wasn't fully developed 15 years ago. We just started with those questions. And little by little, it felt like the Lord began to answer those questions. And so one of the things that came early on was this idea of rhythms of attention. That was a phrase that Kent had developed. What if there were some very simple things that if we just did them as a rhythm over and over again, it began to produce those things that we were interested in. So these 2 rhythms, looking back now, I see that they're really relational rhythms. So how do we connect with one another on a heart level? How do we connect with Jesus on a heart level? Most of my background, again, seminary graduate, good Presbyterian pastor, was connecting with each other on a head level. And it's a valuable thing. That's there. But what about the heart level? And he began to show us how to do that. We found this simple thing called checking in with Sachet. We didn't make that up. It was something that somebody taught to me, and I thought, wow, that's so simple, but it's so powerful. And we discovered that if we did that, if we checked in with each other on a regular basis, a community developed in a very natural kind of a way. And we began to see the benefits of that. For instance, it was something that children could do. You teach this to kids, and they won't let their parents stop with that. Do it on the dinner table, whatever. We saw that it was so valuable for new people. Somebody new comes to your group, and in the old way of doing church, it might be 6 months before they felt a part of things. But with this simple rhythm, which they can learn in 5 minutes, I mean, it's so simple, people began to feel a part of things almost immediately. That was amazing. And of course, we've seen that in our Church 101 groups where people have a sense of bonding. I've heard it over and over again. People go through Church 101 and then look at this group of people. They're on a screen. They've never met these people before. They say, this is amazing. I feel closer to you guys than I do to people in my church that I've been there for 10 years. What is this? What's going on? And it was a simple connecting on a heart level. We found that Sachet was cumulative, that as we practiced this regularly, it took us deeper and deeper into community. So anyway, that's a lot about that, but those were a couple of the things that the Lord taught us along the way. He taught us about the CO2, the Church of Two. And it was like we use this phrase, building the plane in flight. So this Luke 10 thing was taking off, but the Lord kept adding pieces to the puzzle as we went along. He kept adding people, really key people, like yourself, like Hillary. Tony Daniels was an incredibly important part of what was going on. So that's kind of the next steps of the process.
Thanks. When you were talking about Sachet and the relational rhythm, I was curious, what was your background, maybe even all the way back to growing up, but and then into church, as far as like relational / emotional skills, because obviously that's a big piece, what we call right brain work, right brain expression of Christianity. So yeah, I'm curious, what was your background, and how did the rhythms and what we do in Luke 10 impact you personally?
Yeah, great question. Because this has been a huge paradigm shift for me. In my family growing up, I would say we pretty much didn't do emotions. I remember, for instance, if I was upset when I was a kid, I've got 2 sisters, younger sisters, and maybe we'd been in a fight or I was upset and I was crying. And I can remember my dad saying to me, okay, go to your room until you can stop crying, and then you can come down. And I couldn't have articulated it at the time, but that felt tremendously confusing to me. I was upset, I was crying, but I've got to somehow learn to shut this down in order to be part of the community of the family. And there's a real bind there. So I think I learned what Crispin Mayfield, in his book Attached to God, calls shut down attachment style. I learned that if I was going to get close to my dad, especially, I would have to shut down my emotions. Excuse me. And so I got good at that. And so I just, sort of assumed that I didn't have any emotions. I really didn't know what they were. So I'm a little catching my throat here. And then when I became a Christian, the church that I was a part of was sort of that same thing. It was shut down emotions as well. I think I'm going to go get a glass of water. So hold on, I'll be right back.
We can do that.
Okay.
All right. Yeah.
This is how
I'm gonna look over the I'm gonna look over the questions. If you are tuning in, feel free to take this time to put any questions in the question comment box on the bottom of the page, or on the side of the page, wherever it is. You'll have to log in. You can create a login through the Rally Up platform, or you can use Facebook or Google login, I believe. All right. When was the first moment you realized something was not working in the church? And a question about divorce. Okay. Thanks, Tony. And when was the first moment you realized something was not? All right. Did I say that? Yeah. Okay. All right.
All right. Thank you for your patience. I had
No problem.
a little experience with COVID about 2 weeks ago, and the sort of the cough hangs on a little bit.
Yeah.
So again, I met the Lord when I was 15, and many things about that church, that youth group, were amazing, but it was mostly left brain. And I remember distinctly the little Campus Crusade for Christ booklet, Four Spiritual Laws, and in the back of that, there was what they called the train illustration. There's a little picture of a train. So there's the locomotive, the next car, and then the caboose. And so the idea was you're supposed to put your faith in the facts of the gospel, and the feelings may or may not come trailing along. Don't pay attention to your emotions. That's sort of irrelevant, unimportant, whatever else. Just focus on faith and fact. So it reinforced what I grew up with in my family of ignore your heart, ignore your emotions. And I got really good at that. And frankly, it was going through the divorce, which was one of the things, I think I was 37 at the time, where God began to crack open my heart. Up until that time, I don't think I'd ever cried as an adult. But I went through this really painful experience, and I couldn't stop crying. So learning to check in with Sashay was a simple tool that really helped me to begin to pay attention to my heart. And it's been a journey. It wasn't easy for me early on. I would sort of sit there in the morning with the Lord and say, what am I feeling? I have no clue. And then Tony Daniels comes along and not only name your feelings, but what are you feeling physically? I'm still in process on that. Sometimes I can figure out what my body is feeling. A lot of times I still can't identify that. But Tony is relentless in asking that question, which I really appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a tough one. Good, thank you. So it sounds like you're saying growing up, you had to learn how to shut it down because it sort of wasn't welcome almost in the home.
It wasn't welcomed and it wasn't modeled. That's the other thing.
Yeah, which is very important. As we've learned in Luke 10, we talk a lot about modeling and how that affects that right brain formation. And then you start your faith formation and growing into that. And the same, it was continued to be reinforced that emotions were unimportant. So then you have this collision with Luke 10. Well, then you said that your divorce in the 80s was maybe like a sort of stirred things up and agitated. I
would even say it kind of cracked my heart open.
It cracked it open.
Like, it wasn't like I sat down one day and said, I'm going to decide to pay attention to how I'm feeling. It was like I was just broken. I began weeping at the drop of a hat, and I couldn't turn it off, whereas before I couldn't turn it on.
It's almost like an emotional ekbalo, because we say there's this forcefulness. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's a big when people are coming into Luke 10 and going through their own paradigm shifts, that the emotion one sometimes is a big formational piece.
Yes.
Going from I don't even want to talk about it, and then to be able to slowly crack open.
Can I share one other thing along that line? I'm working on a podcast right now. I haven't posted it, but here's the title. I was deeply struck by a recent news report, which was a Southern Baptist report on sexual abuse. I was deeply saddened. I was angry. And the basic idea is it turns out that between 200 and 300 Southern Baptist pastors and church leaders have been appropriately accused of sexual abuse of, mostly of children, but sometimes adults. And I think that's rampant in the church, not just Southern Baptist, but almost every day we hear about a pastor, mega church pastor, whatever. And And what I want to say in this podcast, and this is sort of outrageous. The title is going to be Southern Baptist Report on Sexual Abuse. We can fix this.
Mm.
I also think we can fix the issue of gun violence, and it's the same issue. It's not something we can fix like, in a day or a month, but I think we can fix it. Here's the key. In order to sexually molest, abuse someone, again, either a child or an adult, you have to have turned off your heart. You have to see that person as an object, not as a person with emotions.
Mm.
Turned off the ability to empathize with the pain that you would be causing them. And of course, the extreme example of that are these massacres that occur. Somebody goes into a school or a supermarket and begins shooting people. In order to do that, you have to have killed a part of your heart that has the ability to empathize with other people. I mean, you can't shoot a person if you see them as a person who feels pain. I think our simple practice of checking in with each other, if that began to be practiced in churches and in homes, it would go a long way to eliminating both of those issues. My contention is, for instance, these like pastors of a megachurch who turns out they were, had an affair with somebody on their staff. My contention is most likely they grew up in a home where people didn't know how to talk about their emotions. Not only what am I feeling, but what are you feeling? And to begin to be able to empathize with you. Part of sachet, sad, angry, scared, happy, excited, tender. Tender is the ability to feel what somebody else is feeling. And that's a relational skill that must be developed in a person's life. If we could see that kind of revolution occur in America, around the world, I believe it would largely end the issue of sexual abuse and gun violence.
Mm. Wow.
It's kind of a crazy idea, but I think it's true.
Wow. No, I do too. And I was talking about this with my CO2 partner often about, especially in 2020, because we found that we were able to navigate a lot of turmoil, the socio-political turmoil of the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Being able to see someone and listen to someone and see their heart and connect, you can navigate that. But then yeah, like the applications it has for so many of these different arenas. So anyway, that's wow. Thanks for sharing that.
So Luke 10 has the potential of not only revolutionizing church, but also revolutionizing society, I believe.
One of the words we use is, I don't know if we borrowed this from Life Model Works, but a self-propagating revolution.
Yeah,
and it's like that benevolent virus idea. It's so lightweight. It doesn't take a lot to multiply.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Let's see. Where are we? Oh, this is a good one. Okay. John, what do you most enjoy about Luke 10?
Well, as I suspect you would say also, there are many levels, many aspects of enjoyment for me. Let's see, how would I say it? So I've done a lot of work on the issue of design. How did God design me? What are the ways that he made me? And I've come to understand that my unique design is as a treasure hunter. I love finding treasure. Some people like finding archaeology type things. For me, treasure are transformational concepts and ideas. So things like Church of Two or Sachet, like we've been talking about, those are transformational ideas. I'm just wired so that kind of thing really excites me. Not only to be able to find it, but then to be able to impart that to others, to share it with my friends, and to see it being really helpful to them as well. So all the many things that I love about Luke 10, the community, the relationships, I mean, there's so many things about that. For me personally, the idea of being able to, that the Lord has helped us discover these treasures, and then to be able to share them with other people and seeing it really changing their lives. I think that maybe is at the top of my list.
Wow. You mentioned design, and I had a question for you about that I thought of earlier today. Because we talk about that in Luke 10 about we're in an ecosystem of grace. We use that phrase.
Yep.
To, some might say like the body of Christ, or this kind of like unity and diversity sort of thing. We talk about an ecosystem where God has given us all graces and perspectives and gifts and opinions and strengths, and we bring that uniqueness, and this ecosystem grows and develops and is nurtured from all of the unique design that's a part of it. So I'd love to hear more about your unique design and what you feel you bring to Luke 10 to nurture Luke 10, and maybe even just broadly beyond Luke 10, like in your world. What maybe just a couple minutes on that, but something that you see.
So this area of design is itself a treasure for me, and there's personal history there. When I was in college, my sophomore year, they said, "What do you want to major in?" I had no clue. I mean, I had no idea. Talked to my parents. They said, "Well, you should major in business. You can always fall back on that." Okay, I'm a business major. And so sophomore year, I'm taking, accounting and economics and things like that. and I'm doing terribly academically. And I'm not goofing off. I'm really trying hard. And I at the end of my first semester, I'm on academic probation. So you better get your act together, buddy. Okay, so I redouble. Second semester, my grades are just as bad, and I flunk out of school. And my assumption is I must be really stupid. What is wrong with me? Ended up getting back in school, changed my major, going to seminary. And it's years later, 1980, that I discover a book called The Truth About You. And this was just like a revelation to me that it wasn't that I was stupid. It's that my school experience didn't fit my unique design. And I began to see the implications of that for me. And then I began to take other people through this process of discovering what your design is. And we're beginning to use that same process in Luke 10, by the way. I think that'll be increasingly part of what we do. So what do I bring to Luke 10? Again, I think it's two things. I'm sort of one of my heroes would be like Thomas Edison. So I don't discover physical things like light bulbs and phonographs and all that. But again, it's this idea of transformational ideas. I'm always exploring stuff like that. And so I love being able to find new things and then bring them to Luke 10 as it's appropriate. And then the other thing I love doing is sharing with other people. So I love finding people who tend to be answers, that is, God has prepared them, and to be able to kind of unpack, here's what Luke 10 is, and to invite you into that. I'm sort of an evangelist in a sense, not so much with the lost, but with Christians who are hungry, who are really want a deeper relationship with other Christians and with the Lord. That's stuff that turns me on every morning when I get up.
Thanks. One thing you said about Thomas Edison, and you don't make physical, light bulbs and things, but it reminded me of Matt Daniels, who's Tony's husband, and he's been involved in Luke 10 for years now. But one time he was talking about how we have spiritual relational technologies, and in Luke 10, like we work with spiritual relational technologies, and I think that that is a good way of. He always has like clever wording for things, but I think that's kind of related to what you're saying there. Like you want to discover these things, these technologies, and things, best practices, and treasures that we can use.
My simple word would simply be tools. What are tools that that help us to grow in with each other, with ourselves, with each other, and with the Lord.
Yeah. Okay. Let me double check the questions at the bottom before we keep going.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So, I'm gonna go here, and so Tony asked. She was asking about divorce. She said divorce is a huge topic, lots of shame involved. How did you get through that? What part do you feel like you played in that? And then she commented, many believe that divorce disqualifies you from ministry. How did you make sense of that? So it's how did you get through it? What part did you feel that you played in it? And what were your thoughts as you processed about making sense of divorce disqualifying you from ministry?
Yeah, that Tony Daniels, she's always a troublemaker.
just a light question.
Yeah, okay. So I think we may have to schedule a whole nother hour to go through all of that stuff. I've certainly spent a lot of time. Let me see if I can say a couple things about it. It was incredibly shameful. I never imagined in my wildest dreams that I would go through a divorce. It was probably the darkest period of my life. Time, part of it, was part of the answer. Another part was having a few people in my life who still loved me and believed in me. I didn't know the definition of joy back in those days. Glad to be with you no matter what. But there were some people like that who were glad to be with me no matter what. I think learning about the process of disorientation. I think it's a book called The Message of the Psalms, which really helped me a lot. And he said you can put Psalms into three different categories, almost three different seasons. There's Psalms of orientation, everything's great, God's good, and then we go into these dark places, which he calls Psalms of disorientation. So Psalm 22, for instance, is one of those. My God, why have you forsaken me? I didn't know that you could pray that way. The churches that I grew up with, God is good all the time. And it was all sort of on the positive level. And as I began to feel permission to be really angry at God, it's like, I feel like you left me down, or I let myself down, all kinds of different emotions, to begin to give language to that and bring it into God's presence. Was that okay to do that? I think that really was part of the process for me. The issue of, does divorce disqualify you? Obviously, I had to work through a lot of that. I don't know that I can unpack that quickly, Zach. In some other setting I probably could, but that's not a 2-minute conversation. But obviously, I came to the conclusion. So one of my good Southern Baptist friends said, at that time, at least in the Southern Baptist Church, he said, you could be convicted of murder, go to prison for that, and come out and still be ordained as a Southern Baptist pastor. But if you were divorced, you couldn't do that. You'd never be a pastor again. And he's saying that is just crazy. That's the way it is.
Yeah.
So, that was my bottom line conclusion: is we are all flawed. I certainly am flawed, and that it doesn't disqualify us from whatever God wants us to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, John. That was a heavier question. So I appreciate your openness about that one. All right, let me jump back in here.
Tony, you have more questions down there?
Yep. I'm just trying to kind of structure them, order them a little bit.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay, so this is one of my questions for you that I thought about this morning. But you've worked in a lot of different types of organizations. You've planted churches. You've been the pastor. You've been on staff. Even working with Don and other organizations. And now you're at Luke 10, which is very different. It's very unique in a lot of ways. What is it like being the founder of an organization like this? It's not traditionally structured. It's different in our rhythms and how we function. So what is it like to be the founder and the leader of Luke 10 versus those other organizations and churches?
Yeah. It just makes me think that God has a sense of humor, for one. So when Kent and I were at the stage of feeling like God wanted us to start this thing 15 years ago, the predominant feeling that I had was, I am not the right person for this. Almost my entire career, except for a little period where I was senior pastor of a church, I wasn't the pastor or the leader. I was like the number 2 guy, and I was always very comfortable with that. There was some other leader that I was there to support and all the rest. And now all of a sudden, if Luke 10 is going to happen, I'm going to have to be whatever you call it, the leader, the founder, whatever. And I was very uncomfortable with that idea. I just didn't see myself that way. And I felt like the Lord told me something that was really important. He said, all you have to do is get up every morning and listen for the few small assignments that I have for you that day. That's it. That's all you have to do. And I thought, oh, okay, I guess I could do that. I think it's actually probably a really good thing that I'm not some sort of type A, super senior pastor personality type. Because what it means is that sort of the whole leadership of Luke 10 is much more collegial. We're really in it together. Everybody has a voice. The whole sociocracy process of governance is a really good fit for me, at least, and I think for everyone else. I think it's a great model. And so, again, I just think it's God's sense of humor that I ended up being the founding whatever of Luke 10. And so I don't feel like I've done some great thing. It's just I woke up every morning, and what was the next thing I'm supposed to do? And all of a sudden, 15 years later, here we are. And it's so much dependent upon other people. I mean, Kent Smith has played a huge role in all of this. I used to think he gives us theological credibility way more than I do. And then Tony Daniels, God brought her. She's like a 10 to be answered, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago. That was so much the Lord. Because I'm sort of an inventor. I can do like the first one of something. I can make the Model T. But Tony comes along, and she is such a compliment because she's such a great trainer and developer of systems. So, it's like, okay, I maybe built the first car, but she comes along and installs power steering and transmission and, all sorts of things, and shows how to kind of, develop an assembly line so you can actually make more than one of these. So she has been so critical to the success of Luke 10. So that's what I think of.
That's great. Oh, I love it. I'm going to go back to the question boxes here, and we're going to rewind your story a little bit. So,
sure.
Well, in your telling your spiritual journey, your faith journey, you mentioned a few different times about how there was, I guess, looking back, you have opinions on how church was functioning, but then you had your Eklo experience where the Lord really thrust you out into a new paradigm. The question is, when was the first moment you realized something was not working in the church? The first moment you realized something wasn't, or maybe the first key moment. However you want to answer that.
Yeah. It was a slow process. It was a what I call a slowly developing disillusionment. Again, I was a pastor for 25 years in probably 3 or 4 different churches, and there was sort of an accumulation of concerns. When it was sort of my own personal experience in church, but also seeing the larger picture of church in America. I just had this sense that America was increasingly becoming a post-Christian country, and that the impact that we were having on the society was less and less. It was almost like Christianity was becoming irrelevant to anything in the lives of most people. And it's like something is wrong with this picture. I think that so many of the concerns and ills that we see and I'm just talking for the U.S. I think it applies to other countries too. But I think so many of the issues that we see in our country today are the result of the church as a whole, and there are certainly exceptions to this, failing to make disciples. Maybe we knew how to attract thousands of people to a big church. Maybe we knew how to build big buildings. Maybe we knew how to put on great programs. But all in all, I think it was largely a failure of making disciples, making followers of Jesus. The church has done a lousy job of that. And I was just feeling more and more and more that was the case. One of the pivotal moments was, again, I was on staff of a mega church at this point, as I began to hear more and more about the church in China and this idea of house church. I'd never heard of house church before. I just assumed that, the churches that I pastored or grew up in, that's probably exactly what church looked like for Paul or Peter or Jesus, right? And it was like this huge epiphany when I realized that all of the churches mentioned in the Bible met in a home and functioned like a small spiritual family. I can't tell you what a revolutionary thought that was for me. They didn't talk about that in seminary. And I began to live into that. I began to see that the church in China, under all kinds of persecution, was thriving. That from the time of Mao Zedong in 1949, everybody thought the church in China was done. There were like maybe 3 million Christians. And today there might be 100 million Christians, most of whom meet in house churches. I'm thinking, what is a house church? I've never heard of that before. And so that set me on the journey. Another key point in the process, again, I'm on staff of a mega church, and I come across this verse in the New Testament I've never seen before. I'd always been interested in the early church. What did that look like? And I find this verse and I think, wow, this probably describes what happened in the early church more than any other verse I've ever seen, but I've never heard anybody preach about it, teach about it. It's like it's been invisible. The verse was 1 Corinthians 14:26. And this is where Paul says, what should we say then, brothers? When you come together, and the Greek construction, it's clear he's talking about church. When you do church, everyone has a word of instruction, a hymn, a revelation, a tongue, interpretation, and so on. Let all these things be done for the edification of the church. That verse was revolutionary to me. And the key word there was the word everyone. When you come together to do church, everybody contributes. Really? I mean, the church that I was in was a church of 4,000 people. There was no way that on a Sunday morning, anybody could contribute. It just wouldn't happen. And that was disorienting to me to see that. But I knew that was the direction. So those were some of the key parts for me.
Thanks. Speaking about house church, so Luke 10 started out as, I think it was originally called Fellowship of House Churches. It's still technically called, like, our nonprofit name is Fellowship of House Churches, right?
Home churches, yeah.
Of home churches. And so there's been a shift since Luke 10 started where the emphasis on the house has, I would maybe decreased. There's been less emphasis on the house specifically. And we've seen lots of people tend to be answers, people coming into Luke 10 that don't gather in a house. So there's been some like shifting of philosophy and shifting of how we think about these things. Can you speak to that a little bit about that shift and about your thoughts about it?
Yeah, absolutely right. When we first started, we thought Luke 10 was just to be a house church ministry. So you've got traditional church, house church. But I think little by little, we began to understand that it wasn't exclusively, it was the idea of church as family. And yes, that can take place in a home. And I still love the Chinese motto, every home a church, every building a training center. I love that. But we can do that kind of thing in a home for sure, but there are other places. So we're working more and more with traditional legacy churches who want to build these kinds of small groups in the context of their larger church. We think that can be done. So much more flexible than how we originally started out, much broader in our emphasis, I would say.
Yeah. I think it was you and Kent started talking about Honey, I Shrunk the Church.
Yeah.
He mentioned that yesterday, that people were going into church, doing big church at home. but you guys recognize that there was more going on, that and you touched on that, the rhythms of attention that we do, and for the relational skills and things like that.
Yep.
But I just personally, that was a big formational thing when I started getting involved with Luke 10, because it wasn't reactive. And I heard that maybe there was a I don't know if this was just a personal thing from someone that I was speaking to, or if this is more organizational, but would you say that there was a reactive element to Luke 10 at once upon a time? And
oh, sure. Absolutely.
What was how did that shift?
It is true. I think early on we felt like the building centered church was really what was preventing what God wanted to do. And so we were reacting against that. And I would hasten to say also, at that time, early 2000s, house churches were beginning to be popular, but oftentimes what people did is they would shrink the church down. So that's where Honey, I Shrunk the Church. So we hear stories about people arranging chairs in rows in their basement, setting up a pulpit in the basement, passing the offering plate, so it was kind of like the big church shrunk down. And that wasn't working. People would do that for 6 months. They'd get frustrated with that. And we realized there's a whole different skill set necessary. This is a whole different animal, we would say, from what I was taught and learned to do in traditional church. I shared that with some pastors recently, who they've gone from traditional church into house church, and it's not working very well. And I said, that's exactly what we figured out, is that there's a whole different skill set, relational brain skills that are necessary for this thing to be effective in a smaller context. And so, I think the emphasis, again, I still say that every church mentioned in the Bible met in a home and functioned like a small spiritual family. But the emphasis is not so much on location as it is on these relational brain skills, how we relate to one another and how we relate to the Lord. And that can happen in a zillion different contexts.
Yeah, that's good. That's been meaningful to see all these varied expressions of family, especially on with the internet today. We have people that gather in homes. We have people that are taking Luke 10 and it's sort of transforming at this DNA level their traditional churches.
Yes.
Because they're starting, it might be like a pastor and one person start a church of two, and they develop these rhythms, and then it's that virus. It transforms the communities. And then you have people doing church of two every day on FaceTime or phone calls. It's beautiful to see, because it's these are all containers, but what we're developing is something beautiful that can be applied in a lot of different containers.
Scripture talks about wineskin and wine. That's exactly what you're saying, is flexibility with the wineskin. It's the wine that really is what's important.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, let me see here. Let me check our questions. Okay, Shannon De Bruyne. Let's just say De Bruyne. Sorry, Shannon.
Let's say that.
John, you may have already talked about this because I got here late, but one of my favorite things about John is his ability to ask questions that matter. Really great question asker. I love asking questions too, but I'm around a lot of people. I don't like to answer questions even about them. I'm around a lot of people that don't like to answer questions even about themselves, and they certainly aren't going to ask me about what's going on in my life. What advice can you give us about living/teaching gentle curiosity to others?
Wow, Shannon, that's a great question. What I say? I think people don't like answering questions because they don't feel safe. A lot of times, it can feel like you're trying to go someplace they don't want to go, and so I think emphasizing the word gentle curiosity. A lot of times, we'll start with topics that are not difficult, and then see how far you can go with that. As people begin to feel safe, they begin to feel that you are a safe person and that you really care. They're often open for you to, probe more deeply. And sometimes I call it fierce conversations, not angry, but conversations about things that matter. And on the other hand, I have to say, sometimes Jesus, he wasn't so gentle with people. He was asking really hard questions, and sometimes they didn't like the questions that he was asking. And so there are times when I think the Lord will ask us to do something like that. But I hope that Luke 10 just increasingly is becoming a community of people who, as an expression of love, are learning to ask questions that matter of one another, because that's how I think relationships are built, and that's how we grow. That's how I think we help each other in the process of growing spiritually.
Yeah. All right. I think we'll probably going to come to an end in just a moment here. I was going to ask you a vision question, and if there's any others that come in, we can ask those before we conclude here today. But what is your vision for Luke 10? What do you see for this community long term?
Yeah. Well, if you're around a while, you'll hear us talking about our Luke 10 vision statement and our Luke 10 mission statement. So vision is what we hope to happen out there. We believe this is what God has put on our heart, and this is like a crazy goal, right? But it is to see a vibrant family of Jesus. That can look a lot of different ways. A vibrant family of Jesus in easy access of every person on the planet, in every region and every people group. And that's my vision. That's what gets me up in the morning, is to see that kind of thing happen. So, and then our mission statement, it's like the mission statement is what has to happen in here for that to happen out there. And we realize for there to be vibrant families, there have to be mature, godly, trained, spiritual moms and dads. Any family is about as healthy as the parents. And so our focus in Luke 10 is on training spiritual moms and dads.
So your vision is the vision.
It is.
All right. Let's see. One last check here. And Shannon responded. She said, wow, John, thanks. Safety. That's a good one to reflect on. Someone recently asked me a huge question in an unsafe manner, and I felt so on the spot. Then I felt bad that they didn't have a good answer on the spot. Yeah. Thanks, Shannon. Tony shares, in response to Shannon, Tony shared her recent podcast episode. And yeah, okay. So I think let me just double check, and I think we'll conclude today. Let me see. Yep, I asked you all my tailored Zach LaValle questions, and we heard from our audience today. So I think that's it.
Great.
Thank you, John. Appreciate
Thank you, Zach. Been a pleasure being with you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll sign off. I think we end this session here.
I can do it if you want, Zach. That way I
Okay.
can pull up the next whatever we're going to do in the meantime.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, John.